Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. I'm still standing. There's no health update basically, I'll get that out of the way straight away. I've got my phone call tomorrow from a doctor to discuss my blood test results. Apart from that, there's nothing booked, there's nothing. So there's no update basically. There will be one possibly after tomorrow's chat. So that's that. Channels thank yous, because we do run two. All those who support this channel by watching the ads, which is how the money changes hands. I've explained that enough times, I'm not doing it again. Most people aren't interested, quite honestly, unless they run their own channel. Yeah, so thumbs up, leaving comments are the two things that YouTube will see and perhaps act on. So number of views on a video, the higher that is, the more YouTube takes notice. I can't really control that. All I can do is make the videos and steer them towards what my viewers actually like. To do that, you need to tell me what you like, which I often ask, and people do leave ideas in comments as to what they'd like to see, and most of the time I'll be able to do it, providing it's physically possible. Yes, and as I said, leaving a comment, number of comments on the video all helps. The thumbs up really does help. I know it seems a bit meaningless, but it does help. So those things are all things you can do for free, basically. You can also subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. That is also free. Despite its terminology, it's just something you do, which if you've got notifications on, you will get a notification when I post a video. With my channel, it's perhaps not quite so important to get the notifications because I post most days. So most days you could just pop in and have a look and see if there's a video, if you see what I mean. Anyway, so that's that out of the way. And on the monetary side, thanks for those who are hanging in there with the membership and, you know, on the Patreon site. So that's the thank yous. And it is appreciated. I know it sounds like a bit of a ritual that I do on Sundays. I don't do it on every video. It gets on my scrutinies on some other people's videos, so I'm not doing it on mine. But I think it's polite to actually say thank you to the people who support the channel. So that's that done. Next. Now, what's going on? In the grow room, we are at the sun's effective peak. For the next 6 weeks, the sun is not going to get much higher in the sky. Therefore, it's not going to get much stronger. And it's not going to change its position that much. So the sun that I get on the roof here appears, it started up in that corner. As the sun comes round from behind that big tree, it will move across. And it's about half the roof gets sun at an angle, given that the roof's at an angle as well. So it's not like direct sun beating down on the roof, it's at an angle. And at the moment, the hottest it's got in here with the door shut, and no ventilation basically. You open the doors and the windows, the bugs come in and the flies and everything else. You get bees trapped in here and whatnot, so I don't. And the hottest it's got so far this year is 27 degrees. I'd prefer 2 degrees less than that. I like 24, 25 degrees over my daytime. That's where I'd want it to be, given the types of orchids that I've got. However, I haven't really got a means of cooling it down, so I'm just going to shut that door because I forgot. With that door open, there's an interaction, a change of air between the lounge, i.e. house air. What is house air that orchids don't like? Dry. However, out here, it stays relatively humid as long as that door's shut. Now when we get up to 26, 27 degrees, my humidity does drop down a bit below 60, but not much. And it's not all day. and it comes back up again as soon as that sun moves. So I'm not going to start running humidifiers or anything at the moment. I'm happy with the way things are running. So that's that. I've analysed, as best I can, because it's difficult to do, the effect that running the lights had. And quite honestly, I don't think it made much difference. I really don't think it was worth the effort and the cost. So I may not do it come the end of this year. What I might do is, if I've got orchids that are progressing with growths that have not yet matured, I might set them up in a single area and run the one big light against that area to try and finish off maturing those growths. So that could be a mix of different types of orchids. Not decided yet. The other thing that I've started doing this year that I have sort of done it in the past but not consistently, is using the seaweed extract. And I still cannot say whether it's making any difference or not. But the one thing I do know is it's not doing any harm. So I can continue with it, if you see what I mean. If I thought it was having an adverse effect, I'd stop. So hang on, I'm going to sneeze. It's a result of one of the tablets I'm taking. I do get a sort of runny nose now and again. It's not a cold. It's one of the known mild side effects that some people get. Just get a bit of a runny nose, sniffles. Not all day, it's not a big deal. And if that's all I've got to put up with, I'll live with that, definitely. Yes, so that's the idea with the lights. And the seaweed, as I say, it does no harm, so I'm quite happy to use it. But it doesn't go in every feed. Now, listening to Rick, his sort of bottom line is he never uses water that hasn't got calcium in it. So even if he's not actually feeding, he'll still put some calcium in the water. But you have to bear in mind there is nothing similar in Rick's growing environment to this one. They're totally non-compatible. They're totally different. One's growing outside in Florida or wherever it is. It's somewhere where there's good temperatures, relatively frequent rain, so probably a reasonable humidity in the air, there's airflow, and the orchids do well under that environment. I've got some orchids in here that wouldn't last more than a couple of weeks in that environment because they're cooler growers. Yeah? So again, different types of orchids. There's some crossover. We'll look at one of the crossovers in a minute. But it's a totally different growing environment. You know, Danny down in Cyprus, totally different growing environment. And it's okay, she's growing indoors in a grow room that's probably not too different to here, apart from the fact it's got a roof, whereas mine's got a, well, nearly clear roof. It's not clear, but you know what I mean. I do have light coming in from above, whereas her light is either artificial lighting, you know, cases, or near the windows. And I think she may have some outside, but I'm not sure about that. I think her experiment with putting some outside a couple of years ago, perhaps, it was a miserable failure. If you don't try things, you never know, do you? You know. Yes, so different growing environments. The closest to me that I know well is Insa, and he's not even that close to me because his room that he grows most of his orchids in till he gets his second grow room set up gets incredibly warm. It gets sun on the glass, direct on the glass, not a bit on the roof like I get. And his room heats up way beyond what mine ever will. So, you know, different environment yet again. So, and that's the big deal with orchids. The environment really dictates how well some orchids will grow or not, and what sort of orchids ought to be grown. And if you keep growing orchids that are not suited to the environment you've got, then you will probably lose some or have orchids that don't please you because they don't do very well. So get your environment well and truly established in here. What is your daytime temperature range on average, growing season and non-growing season, you know? And what do your temperatures go down to at night? Do they even change much? You know, there's some environments where the night temperatures aren't that much lower than the daytime temperatures. So get your environment into your head, it's important. Temperature ranges, humidity levels and light levels. All of those have an effect on how well some orchids will do in that environment, and to some extent will restrict the type of orchids you can grow. Without knowing that well, yeah, then you could be spending good money on orchids that are never actually going to do that well in your environment. Better to buy those that are going to do well, and you can base that on what others do that have got a similar environment to you, and or your own experience which you gain over the years, you know. I mean, I haven't had a lot of luck. Most of my black hair type dendrobiums keeled over when I moved house, but I've got two that are doing well. I mean, one of them's an absolute stonker. You know, it's got more blooms on than I've ever seen on a black hair type of that type. Yeah, so, you know, some things are doing okay when perhaps they didn't ought to be. Black hair types don't like getting cold, and I don't get those temperatures in the winter, so they shouldn't do well here, but two of them are doing well. I've got some oncidium types that are not cool growers, the normal intermediate type oncidiums that are not doing that well. I don't know why, they should be, you know. So it's not always just the environment, sometimes it's the media choice. Sometimes it's just the fact that you didn't get a good plant. What do I mean by that? In a batch of plants, like anything else, a bunch of puppies, a bunch of little baby birds in a nest, a bunch of seedlings, your pansy seedlings that you're going to plant out, your bedding plants, your sweet corn that you've planted up ready to plant out in the group because of the wind pollination. In or amongst all of those things, there will be some that aren't as good. Well, you can get one of those orchids out of the batch that wasn't very good. And unless you saw the whole batch and could pick and choose, then you're stuck with the one you got. And you do the best you can. Right, part of the Sunday chat, the end part, used to be a spotlight. Well, that was on a single orchid. Then we changed to perhaps having a spotlight on a genus, yeah, or something like that. The bit on the end of this video isn't a spotlight as such. It's an unusual one. It's based on what you can do, and what you should do, and what you shouldn't do. Confused? Let's unconfuse you. I'm going to swing the camera around, and basically we are now going to talk about Phalaenopsis. Not just store-bought Phalaenopsis. I'm mixing in a species here because I want to think and talk about the probable differences that you've got. So I'll swing the camera around. I'm not going to take it off. Am I going to take it off the tripod? Yes, I am actually. We'll hand hold it so that we can do close-ups and things should I need to. If it's on the tripod, I really have trouble doing that. So a bit of wobbling around for a minute or two, or a few seconds, that's all it is. You'll live. You'll survive. Get my screen round the right way. Right, so here we have three Phalaenopsises. Well, there's three of them anyway. And the first thing I want to talk about is spikes. You'll notice these all have a spike. Now, first of all, I'm going to talk about this one. So let's get the other two out the way. Now, this damaged leaf was me, basically, when this leaf was smaller than this one, a little tiny little leaf like that, it had some mealybugs down in the joint. And I got a pair of scissors and hooked them out and physically damaged that leaf. That damaged leaf remains damaged and always will be. It grew, the damage that the point from the scissors did grew with the leaf. It still sort of functions, but it didn't grow to its full size. You can see the leaf below is bigger. So what's this plant actually doing at the moment as a plant? Well, its latest leaves are as big as, if not slightly bigger than previous leaves. This is always good. This is what you need on a Phalaenopsis. As big as before or a bit bigger, but not progressively getting smaller. If your leaves are progressively getting smaller, you have a problem. It might not be serious, but it's got to be worth looking into. And it can be one of many things. It could be lack of suitable nutrients. It might not be the lack of the nutrients that you're putting in the pot. It might be that the plant can't absorb them properly because you've got a pH issue. Combination of those two could mean your plant's not getting enough feed. Yeah? It could just be that it's not getting enough hydration, but you would normally see that in limp, floppy leaves, irrespective of what feed is in there. A long time ago, when I had my own house, and I used to have some Phalaenopsis on the dining room table, and I used to work away a lot of the week, but they were just ignored. They got tap water. They very rarely got any feed. They got tap water. They didn't do bad. I won't say they did brilliant. They didn't do bad, and they did reflower now and again. So, you know, these have been bred to be a lot more tolerant than previous versions. So that's the plant. What about below ground? No plant is any good unless it's got something like that below it. Those roots are green because these were watered yesterday. Look at the bark on the top of the plant. It's already dry, but it's still wet, damp. Let's say wet. Can't get that wet actually, but that's a pot full of roots, and they hydrate nicely. So plant wise this is doing okay, and it is currently pushing up a new leaf, so it's in vegetative growth. So it needs suitable feed for that, because to me that is more important. Getting that leaf up to this big is more important than what the spike's doing. So this is a Phalaenopsis that was in bloom a while ago, had a very large spike on it, and I said, let's try cutting the spike and see if we can get a side shoot. Well, we've got our side shoot. I also said I don't normally do this because I don't like the look of it. I don't like the look of that sawn off and sticking out sideways. It's unnatural, and I don't like it. But nonetheless, we will get some blooms. We've got some buds here. 1, 2, 3. We may get 4 or 5 blooms on there. I bet you anything they won't be quite as large as the blooms that were on the original spike, but nonetheless they should have the same coloration and markings. So cutting a spike above a node can work. Wouldn't have been any point cutting above that node because that node's gone over, as has the one below it. That one would probably have worked. It's even got an embryo shoot. Yeah. So who knows, when this one's done, over and gone, perhaps we can come down a node and see if we can push that one out. No chance. I only did this one as a let's see if we can get it. I don't like it. And the other thing you've got, if you've got a strong healthy plant with a really good root system and a good number of leaves, so it has some strength in it, it will push up a good spike as and when its time is ready, and the flowers will be will be good. When that spike's finished, the plant would normally go back into vegetative growth and grow another couple of leaves ready to produce another spike. Yeah? By doing this, you're often going to delay that process. Yeah, now I'm lucky, mine's decided to grow a leaf anyway despite extending the spike. It's got a really good root system, so it's doing okay. So that can be okay if you don't mind the look of it. You want to get a few more flowers. You will get quite a long gap between cutting that and actually getting the branch to actually produce and then grow big enough and the buds to swell and actually open. This could be a couple of months away from actually blooming yet. It's only, you know, hasn't pushed on very much yet. Anyway, so that's that one. Now that is actually a named hybrid. It's actually got a name. It's mass produced and it's come from one of the mass producing nurseries, probably Netherlands, maybe Germany, but over in the EU somewhere, that actually takes a bit of pride in the hybrids that they produce and bothers registering them. Not many do that. So a named hybrid. It's nice to have a name. It's not essential, but you know, nice to have a name. Now I'm going to switch to this one. Why? Because it's a species. And this is actually, it's equestris, and it's a pyloric form. I'll put a pop-up of the blooms because they are, if you don't know what pyloric means, it just means not normal, misshapen, abstract, lots of names. Anyway, species Phalaenopsis are often less vigorous and can be a bit more delicate than your store-bought hybrids. As such, they have a narrower tolerance range. Yeah, I mean, you get some people, the temperature's only got to go up 2 degrees and I'm boiling hot, I can't coat it, and then it drops 2 degrees and they put their coat on. Very narrow tolerance range. Wusses, I think they're called. But some plants have a narrow tolerance range of their temperatures, their humidity levels, and everything else that goes with them. And the Phalaenopsis species would probably, in the main, come into that category. They're far more susceptible to change, messing them up. Yeah? So anyway, what we've got here is the latest leaf is growing on. It's still growing. It's dropped a leaf recently and it has a spike. And that spike's just starting to produce buds. These blooms are quite small, so you know, that's that. Now I'm growing that on the kitchen windowsill like that, the windows here. Why am I doing that? Because the spike will curve over towards the window and the blooms will open along it above the plant. If it was facing the window like that, this would end up touching the glass. Yeah, so you can train a spike, providing you get it, you know, before it's already produced. Yeah, so if you've got directional light, you can train your spike to head in a certain direction. And not only am I training that spike in that direction, I'm also training the latest leaf to head in the direction it's destined to go in. Again, if this was facing the window like this leaf would probably start becoming upright and wouldn't be as, you know, wouldn't form the normal layer. So if you ever go in for Phalaenopsis species or primary crosses, you know, much closer to the species than the mass-produced stuff, then you will need to check the environment, because there are a couple of species that are cooler growers and some of them are warm to hot growers, and they won't be very happy if they're away from their, you know, comfort range. So that's just a chat about training a spike. It's got roots and some of these roots are growing. It's not a brilliant root system, and it would be better if those 2 roots up here had actually gone in the pot, likewise with that one. But it has got some growing roots. That's nice to see. There's an old root running along here that's branching. So it's producing some new roots from an old root. Yeah? There's a root that stopped growing and now it's started again. Yeah? There's a damaged root there that started growing again. Yeah? So, an assortment of roots there. This didn't actually have very good roots when I got it. It's actually Hannah's, not mine. Right, so that's that one. More coffee. Right, this is my newest Phalaenopsis. This came from our show back in March, so I've had this since March. It was in bloom with 2 spikes when I got it. This one and the one that's still there. Excuse that clicking sound, that's basically the sun heating up the plastic roof, and it expands in the joints. It clicks when it does it. Right, so this one, what have we got in the pot then? It has been repotted since I got it. Not a lot of root activity because it's relatively recently been repotted, but the roots it's got are more than adequate for the plant. Yeah, it's got quite a lot of roots. They're just not actively growing at the moment. I suspect we will get some branching and some activity in the not too distant future. The latest leaf, which isn't mine as such, is not as large as the others. This was there when I got it, so obviously that leaf got damaged at some point, and to make it look pretty somebody chopped it off. Looks like they chopped it off with a buzzsaw. Anyway, it's a relatively healthy plant. It's got some good leaves, good size. It's a pity this wasn't full size, but I suspect the next one will be. But there is no sign of a leaf growing at the moment, because this could be one that, as long as it's pushing up spikes and buds, it will not grow a leaf. It will not go into vegetative growth. Now, some are like that. Some will do everything. They'll grow a spike, a new leaf and new roots all at the same time. And others are reluctant to produce a leaf until all remnants of blooming are gone. So, you know, if you've got one of those, you will find out, because if you keep doing this and allowing the spikes to extend, you won't get the vegetative growth, which will effectively slow the plant down overall. Right, so we left this spike on. It's shot out sideways without any help from me whatsoever, and this spike up here ended here, and it's extended, so it's growing another extension to the spike. Yeah? In theory, these blooms will possibly be a little bit smaller than the original. The original was produced in the nursery in perfect conditions. These are not. These are not. So the blooms may be a little smaller, but they should still have reasonable colour. They get good feed, plenty of it, and they've got good light. So that's that. Right, so summing up spikes. As your blooms start to drop, they will normally drop from the bottom, moving towards the top, because the one at the bottom was the first one to open. They open from the biggest bud to the smallest one. That's how they work. So once the blooms start to drop, what happens with Phalaenopsis blooms, they're relatively flat and they tend to fold. The bits on the outside, the left and the right, fold in over the lip, and then you get up the next morning, it's on the floor. That's what they do. So as the blooms start to fall, the spike is coming to the end of its life. What you can do is what we've discussed here. In my mind, what you should do is assess the size and strength of your plant. And if your plant is the proverbial butcher's dog with a stonking root system, good leaves that have progressed and got at least the same size or bigger, and it's a strong, healthy plant, then by all means do that. if your plant's a bit wishy-washy and only has a couple of leaves and the roots aren't too good, don't do that. You'll weaken the plant. Get rid of the spike altogether and give it a rest. Yeah? So you often find the store-bought Phalaenopsis are exhausted. They are forced with perfect nutrition, perfect environment, perfect temperatures, and they're forced often up with 2, sometimes even 3 spikes when they aren't really ready. They're forced. And when you get them and the blooms are finished, they're exhausted. And I think it pays to give them a rest. Give them a break from everything to do with blooming. Give them a break. That's my view. So in my opinion, what you should do is only do that if your plant is big, strong and healthy and capable. Otherwise, don't do it. Yeah? You can, going back to what I said at the start, you can, and if you do it on quite a weak plant and it does produce an extension, you'll weaken it even more. Yeah? So go steady. If a spike naturally produces a branch, then the genetics of that plant are geared up to a branching spike, or it wouldn't have done it, because you've done nothing. You know, this branch started before all the blooms had dropped. So it's doing it on its own accord. You could say, along with this extension, if this was a weak plant, despite losing these blooms and these blooms, you might be better taking the spike off. But this isn't a bad plant. It's got a good set of leaves on there, apart from this one. It's got a good set of leaves and half of one. And the roots aren't bad. And the roots are going to start growing again soon. I know enough about these to know what it's going to do. So at the moment it's not in vegetative growth. So it can put its energy into these blooms without any ill effect to the plant. So you've just got to think with your spikes. First of all, give yourself a pat on the back for getting one, if it's your spike, if you've grown it. If you've bought it in bloom, then your goal is to get it to do it again. Yeah? And to get it to do it again, you need a strong, healthy plant, plus certain conditions, which I'm not doing in this talk. That's a separate thing altogether. I will say, though, there are 2 main types of mass-produced Phalaenopsis. There are those that bloom during late spring into summer. They will bloom probably no matter what you do. And then there are those that bloom late autumn into winter that need a cool down to trigger the spike. There are variables, yeah, but those are the 2 sort of main categories they come into. And it's all dependent on what went into them. But just remember that you might have one that ought to bloom. Its genetics say, I should be blooming late autumn into winter as the night temperatures drop down. Notice I said night, not day. Daytime temperatures don't seem to make a lot of difference. It's the drop at night that triggers the spikes. If your particular hybrid is genetically geared up to that, and you don't achieve that drop, you might not get a bloom, so you might miss a year. So bear that in mind. But as I said, the ones that bloom like now, Northern Hemisphere, they tend to do that whatever you do. The only thing that will stop them is keeping them too cold. Yeah, and none of the Phalaenopsis like to be too cold. I mean, their ideal daytime temperature for these types of hybrids, I'm not going into the species now, forget that one, but these types of hybrids, their ideal daytime temperature is 26 to 28 degrees with about 60% humidity and at least 14 hours light, good light, yeah? Not burning sunshine, I mean good light, not necessarily sunlight, okay? And that's their happy place in the daytime. And they don't mind if it doesn't drop that much at night, but what they don't want to do is get a chill at night compared with that daytime. So, right, so that's store-bought Phalaenopsis. I am considering, I haven't thought it right through yet, There's a company nearby here that's online presence is called Love Orchids. They're just up the road, not far away at all. We may be organising a trip there, which will be interesting because I'll be able to film inside a mass production nursery, providing they allow it. That I don't know. I mean, I've been in there quite a few times before, but not with a camera stuck on the end of me. That remains to be seen. But what I was thinking of doing is picking a couple of the not so good Phalaenopsis on the kitchen window to make some space, and they sell their orchids online. The only problem with them is you don't get to pick colours, but they do a batch of 4 for not much money at all with free postage. I think it's 40 quid for 4 Phalaenopsis in bloom. I'm not sure, they might even be double spikes. And I know that their plants are good. You know, you don't get the rotten roots and the, you know, all that sort of nonsense that you get from some of the European ones. They're good plants. And get a set of 4 and start a new series based on those 4. Because the first thing with, if I get 4 from that place, is they won't need repotting immediately. They won't have knackered media that's all falling apart. They'll have a good bit of media. They take a bit of pride in their plants, unlike some of them who just want the money. Give me the money. I mean, they want the money, but if they can sell 10 Phalaenopsis orchids, really well packed, in bloom, with free postage for 40 quid, I think that's not a bad buy. And I'm, you know, as I said, I can't pick the colours. You have what's around at the time, basically. But they'll be good plants, and then we'll treat those as a little sort of mini series from the point I get them and open the box, you know, and monitor them, repot them eventually, and perhaps do some of this with the spikes and some remove the spike completely. So it's a thought. Your thoughts on that? Bearing in mind orchids now are so flipping expensive. That's not a bad buy at all. What it really is in practical terms, they supply supermarkets and things like that. So they're trade only. You can't just walk in the door. There's no retail apart from the online presence you can buy online. But it's in packages. So, you know, there's packages of 4 and 6 and things like that. Some with ceramic pots and, you know, the bare one's just the pot. But they'll come in a clear pot, you know, so they're not trying to hide anything like some do. So, yeah, it might be worth having a go at that. You know, if I went to Burnham's, the cheapest I'd get a Phalaenopsis there is 20 quid. And quite a few of them are 25. And they will have come from the EU. And they probably will have knackered media and some roots that are rotting. You know, that's how they're bought in. I'm not having a go at Burnham's, that's just how they are. And anybody else that's buying them in, like Lawrence Hobbs and various others, that's what you get, you know. So Double H is a different ball game altogether. We may give it a go. So that's it for today. Our AGM is next Saturday. I've done my treasurer's report. That's gone off to Lynn and my assistant treasurer, back up, to have a look at and make comments and everything so that it's ready for next Saturday. I do have to actually stand up and give a report for the... It's a bit out of step really, because the AGM's in June, but I'm giving a report for the previous year that ended 31st of December. So it's like 6 months old. It feels strange sometimes talking about the shows when they're last year's shows, you know. But that's how they do things. And after the AGM itself, there is a plant auction. Who knows? There might be something there that I fancy. We shall see. And then on the 16th, so is that the week after? It probably is. I shall be off up to Birmingham with Hannah. We've agreed that I pick her up on the way up, go to the do, at the end, load all the plants up in my car and then drop her off home on my way back here. The alternative was to go and get her Saturday and come back here. Well, that adds over 3 hours driving on into that weekend by doing that on the Saturday. So even though it's going to take a bit longer to get there via Hannah's place than it would be if I just tore up the dual carriageway, it's still not as much as those 3 hours. So, and it also means that Hannah's not having to get up at the crack of dawn here to start off with me. She gets an hour and a half respite while I get to her place. So that's what we've decided to do. And I may or may not buy orchids there. I will try and do some filming, but I'm not spending all of my time in the orchid section. I want Hannah and I to have a look round the show, have a look at some of the show gardens, some of the other floral exhibits and things. I don't just want to do orchids. It's a massive show. It's sort of almost along the lines of Chelsea. Not perhaps as big and prestigious, but it's along those lines. The same sort of things will be there. So I shall come back with something, I'm sure. And let's end on something that we may not get for a while. Dendrobium hercoglossum. Still one of my favourites. We drop a cubed from lower down. So there we go, and thanks for dropping by, thanks for supporting the channel, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.